Welcome to the Philly Special. Bunch of guys who just like to talk about Philadelphia sports. Brought to you by Purell Hand Sanitizer. It eliminates 99.99% of germs. Alright, today's segment, we are going to be tackling the Big Ten East and where Penn State stands. I'm Ben Lawson. I'll be co-hosting today with Kyle Walney. And our statistician is going to be Joel Robinson.
All right, so first things first, what we want to talk about is we want to talk about just an overall kind of schedule breakdown here for Penn State. Who on the schedule is looking tough, what kind of games are going to pose a challenge to the Nittany Lions, and kind of where we see the really tough games coming from, where they should, look out. So if we were to look at the schedule, then basically what we're going to see is they struggled a little bit in the first week with Appalachian State. I think that's a little bit of, you can kind of throw that result out. I think that's kind of a first game kind of deal. I'm not too worried about the result of that. Plus, Appalachian State, it's a pretty decent team, kind of easy to overlook. But they really bounced back pretty well. Big offensive performances against Pitt and then against Kent State.
Significant wins.
Yeah, so again, I'm not too worried about the offense at Penn State. Of course, makes sense to worry a little bit after you lose a guy like Joe Moorhead. But you lose Saquon Barkley to the New York Giants the first round of the NFL draft. But reload is what you got to do if you're in the Big Ten East. Try and keep up with teams like Michigan and Ohio State that are reloading every single year. That's what you got to do.
Luckily for Penn State too, their schedule is a little soft at the beginning, give them some time to get out the growing pains with their offense and prepare for that September 29th matchup where they get their first real test against the Ohio State Buckeyes there.
Yeah, coming up this weekend at Illinois, after that tough game against App State, there's really no better way to come back than, with Pitt, Kent State, and Illinois, games that they're heavily favored in for 3 straight weeks before they have that big showdown with Ohio State. Fairly reasonable to expect College Game Day to be there. That's a 7:30 kickoff. That's going to be a huge game. But that's between two teams that offensively are tops in the nation. Ohio State offensive S&P plus ranking second. Penn State at 15th, and honestly, it's probably even better than that, considering that they're just adjusting right now to life without Joe Moorhead.
Kyle, can you remind some listeners, just in case they don't know, what exactly S&P Plus is and what it entitles?
Sure. So S&P Plus is kind of a way to measure some of the most important factors in what really makes an offense kind of have success. Explosiveness, efficiency, finishing drives, things like that. Takes all that, kind of puts it together into one overall number. It's similar to S&P Plus in a general sense. It's just specific to the offense, and it's adjusted for the national scoring average. So kind of just gives you an idea of how good offensively a team is in comparison to the rest of the country. And Penn State 15th in the country, that's really good. But you can expect that number to just get better.
Right. So as we look ahead here at the Penn State schedule, obviously the Big Ten East is going to be very competitive this year. A lot of great ball clubs over there. The West, not quite as competitive. But as I look ahead here in the schedule, Kyle, maybe you can add in here. I'm trying to think maybe what are some possible big games for Penn State, maybe some must-wins, and with their schedule, which is I think it is ranked 30th overall, the strength of schedule, according to TeamRankings.com here. What are their do they have any must-win games, and are there any really matchups you think they might struggle with, or what are your thoughts on that, Kyle?
So in terms of must-win games, I think that the one that you got to look at immediately is that game coming up in 2 weeks against Ohio State. And I think that's just because Ohio State they showed it against TCU. Offensively, that is an explosive team. Points per play, ranking 6th in the country right now, and that's with Dwayne Haskins just trying to get used to the offense. That's just going to get better. That's a huge game right there because that's a rival in the East. in Ohio State, and a team that everyone nationally is expecting to run away with the East. So if Penn State wants to try and keep up with Ohio State there, then they really got to win that first game. If they lose that game, then they immediately put themselves behind the 8 ball.
And then the next week they will have to play against a pretty solid Michigan State team. They've already dropped a loss, kind of an upset to Arizona State this year. But, I mean, it's Michigan State. They're a solid ball club. But I think they should be okay with that game. And then I'm kind of looking up to this November 10th game with Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, of course, probably the favorite in the Big Ten West. A lot going on in the season, big stakes on that game. If Wisconsin wants to have any shot at making a playoff, they'll be wanting to play really hard in that game, and I think that could be probably another big test for Penn State, especially towards the end of the year. It just gets more and more important to keep those W's rolling, and I think that could be a really big one there.
Yeah, and the problem with Wisconsin this year, again, and you saw it against BYU, and it just seems to be the same issue every single year. It's kind of similar to the issue that Michigan and Michigan State both have. It's that explosiveness on offense. And explosiveness being one of the most important statistics for an offense, really one of the best predictive measures of how well a team's going to play is that points per play measure. And if you look at Michigan State, as of right now, ranking 73rd, not even close to good enough. Michigan, better at 18th, but that number might be a little bit deceiving with some weak opponents the last couple weeks. Didn't play really well against Notre Dame. Points per play way down against Notre Dame. They relied actually on special teams for the majority of their scoring in that game. And then Wisconsin 43rd. You bring him back, Jonathan Taylor, guy that's a front runner for the Heisman Trophy. You would expect him to have a big game against BYU. You got a quarterback in Alex Hornibrook, who personally I've never been a huge believer in, but that's a guy who's got experience, big time experience playing in championship games. That's a guy who you would expect to be performing a little bit better. And against BYU, they just came out flat on offense. They looked boring. It was very vanilla. Really, there's no explosiveness on that offense. It doesn't really hurt that they got some wide receivers out right now, but they can't seem to get that big play. Same problem Michigan's got. Can't really find the big play. And really, that's what you need. That's what you need to win. If you look at Penn State and Ohio State, they do it better than anyone. That big play. They need a big play in the second quarter, down by a couple points. Third quarter, fourth quarter, late in the game. Those teams can get it for you. I don't know if Wisconsin, Michigan State, I don't know if they can do that. And that's kind of my reasoning behind seeing Ohio State as really the biggest obstacle for Penn State right now.
Now, building off of that, we can kind of transition to our next phase of this episode tonight. We mentioned a lot about Ohio State and what is probably the heavy favorite to win the Big Ten East. We mentioned them a little bit already as a big test for Penn State. But I kind of want to talk about them for a little bit and who might pose the biggest threat to Ohio State, maybe to walk away with the Big Ten East title. Obviously, they're coming off a pretty solid win against a decent TCU team. A lot of explosive offense there. A pretty scary first quarter for Ohio State. They were down after the first quarter, but their defense really helped pull them through it. Now they do have a recent injury with Nick Bosa. Don't know how long he'll be out or how much of an impact that'll make. But hopefully he could be back maybe for Ohio State before they play Penn State. But looking at Ohio State's schedule and who they're playing, I kind of want to talk about who you think might be the biggest test to Ohio State. Is it Penn State? Is it somebody else? What do you think about that, Kyle?
So I think it's Penn State for the exact reasons that I listed above. I think the only team that can match Ohio State point for point right now is going to be Penn State. I expect Michigan State and Michigan to both keep the game close with Ohio State for probably about the first 2, maybe 3 quarters. But then, like I said, Dwayne Haskins, J.K. Dobbin, that offense is just, there's too much explosiveness. And I don't think that, the archaic, 1980s bully ball that they're running in East Lansing, in Ann Arbor, I don't think that that's going to be able to keep up with Ohio State's scoring offense. But Penn State, Trace McSorley, I really think that that right there is your team that's going to be able to match Ohio State, point for point. I think they're the only ones that can really keep up.
No, I agree with that. I mean, on paper, I think the rest of Ohio State's schedule, maybe before the year you maybe thought Nebraska could have been a test, but they're sitting here 0-2. Michigan State's already lost a game. Michigan's already lost a game. Only 3 games into the season. And I think I'd have to agree that Penn State definitely will be their biggest game, but that's just on paper. Now, I mean, coming up, very last game this season, Ohio State, Michigan, always going to be a great game. Records don't matter. It's just going to come down to who wants it more there. And if Michigan can get back from that loss and keep fighting and keep winning, that could be a huge game for the Buckeyes. And maybe where Michigan can try to spoil the season, And I think that actually could be a really big game for them and might even prove to be more important than this Week 4 Penn State game. Because a loss for Ohio State, Penn State, could cost them the title, but I mean, Michigan, they're going to have to get that right at the very end of the season too. Like, the stakes are just way too high at the end of the year. It'll be hard to pose a resume after a loss to Michigan as well. So I think that might be definitely want to keep your eyes on. But Penn State, Ohio State, definitely going to be a fantastic game. September 29th, expecting a lot from that one.
Yeah, and I would definitely say in terms of, challenging Ohio State, if Ohio State's able to get past Penn State in that game on September 29th, then I think that you immediately have to turn your attention to Michigan. I think that the fact that Ohio State has to play Michigan at the end of the year, I think that's definitely pretty big for Michigan, because I think at that point what you're going to see is that by that point Michigan will have opened up the offense a little bit. They're going to start running a little bit more of that spread scheme. We'll see the points per play go up a little bit. They'll start using Shea Patterson a little bit more like he was used at Ole Miss, because I think that they're going to start to realize once Michigan starts to get into their tougher games, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Penn State, I think what they're going to realize is that what they're doing offensively isn't working anymore. Got to try and get a little bit more explosiveness. I think you're going to see them start to sort of veer away from the run-pass kind of offense, and I think that you're going to see towards the end of the year they're going to be, maybe a little bit better on offense in terms of explosiveness. So I definitely think that by the end of the year, Michigan's going to pose a little bit bigger of a threat to Ohio State. It's just whether or not Michigan can get through their Big Ten East schedule unscathed before that game against Ohio State at the end of the year.
Right. Moving on here, shifting gears a little bit. The next part of the segment here I want to bring up is we've talked a lot about the East, and we've talked already about a lot about Ohio State, Penn State being the possible probably top contenders for the East title and to play against somebody in the West. Just real quick over to the West, do you think there is another team that can compete with Wisconsin on the West? I mean, do you think a Northwestern or an Iowa could pull an upset and maybe have a chance to beat out Wisconsin to play in that title game? Or do you think it'll be Ohio State or Penn State probably playing against just the Badgers?
I'm going to be honest. Before the season, I would have told you that it was Wisconsin running away with it. I think that they are probably the best coached team, and I think that they have the most talent as of right now. But if you look at what they lost defensively, I mean, this Wisconsin team defensively is not what we have come to expect. Defensive S&P Plus is 27th right now, and that is including the fact that they really haven't played anybody yet. Yet they're sitting at 2-1 with that loss to BYU. Defensively, Wisconsin doesn't really have that, defense that they usually hang their hat on, and they don't really have the offense to make up for it. So, before the season, I'd have told you, without a doubt, Wisconsin. Now, Iowa looked pretty good in wins over Iowa State. That offense still isn't really anything special. Defensively, Iowa's Iowa. I mean, it seems like they're pretty much the same thing every year defensively. Good team. Not a whole lot of, standout stars or anything like that, but, pretty good team defensively. I think Iowa could give them a run for their money. It's going to come down to Iowa, Wisconsin. I don't think anyone else really has a shot. But really, I think what they're doing is, Wisconsin and Iowa are going to be competing for the right to get blown out in Indianapolis. I don't think that it's even going to be close. I think that what you're going to do is you're going to see Ohio State or Penn State, walk into Indianapolis and come out with a big time win. I mean, this could be the first year where you see a Big Ten championship game where Ohio State or Penn State or whoever comes out of the East is favored by 10, 15 points. Like, I think that is that's very possible. It's similar to Clemson. Whoever Clemson's going to end up playing in their championship game, they're going to be a big-time favorite over, as they should be. Last year, beating Miami pretty bad. It's, I really don't think that whoever wins the West really matters too much. I think it's going to be a pretty easy game for whoever wins the East in Indianapolis.
Now, it's obviously early in the season. A lot of football left in the year. But we're already sitting here talking about playoffs, and I just want to think. I just want to look. We've already seen LSU beat Auburn. We've already seen some big SEC matchups. Do you have any predictions? Who we thinking at for the 4 this year? Who do you think is going to be in the playoffs? Do we think maybe Big Ten can get 2 teams in? Do you think the SEC will get 2 teams in? Do you think it's what are your thoughts here towards the end of the season, maybe for who will compete for that trophy?
At the beginning of the year, I think I would have told you that the Big Ten was the conference that was most likely to get 2 teams. But with the way that they've performed, the way that most of these teams have looked, especially offensively, absolutely terrible these first few weeks. I'm not buying it anymore. I really don't. I don't think that the Big Ten's going to get 2 teams. I think that what we're gonna do is by the end of this year, Big Ten country is gonna be hoping and praying that Ohio State and Penn State, whoever wins that game on September 29th, just continues to win out. That way you've got a undefeated, at most 1-loss team coming out of the Big Ten East, big time win, and I think that you'll see that Big Ten champion in the playoff for sure. Personally, as much as it pains me, I think it's going to be Ohio State. Penn State definitely has the best shot at them. I just, I don't think that they're going to get it done. I'm definitely going to go Penn State. I think that they will end up being the 3 seed, so they'll be playing in that semifinal against number 2. Number 2, I'm going Clemson. I think that they got a cakewalk in the ACC. I really don't think anyone's going to be able to challenge them. Virginia Tech, maybe, but at the same time, offensively, Virginia Tech can't hang with them. I think you're going to see a lot more Trevor Lawrence for Clemson. I got them at 2. Number 1 is Alabama, because Alabama is Alabama. If you look at any metric, they're going to be tops in the country, and that's a good formula for winning. But at the same time, use the eye test. Sit down, watch them play a game. Ole Miss scored the first 7 points against them, and Alabama then rattled off like 59 straight points. So I think that you got Alabama number 1, and then I think Oklahoma and Kyler Murray, I think that they win the Big 12. So you got Alabama versus Oklahoma in the first semifinal, and then Clemson against Ohio State in the second semifinal. But, I could very easily see Penn State ended up being that team from the Big Ten that makes it. Other than that, I think it's pretty set in stone. I don't think the Pac-12 gets a team. I think that it's pretty set in stone that you're going to get Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma, and then whoever wins the Big Ten East.
I really do think if Penn State does drop the game to Ohio State on 29th, now I think whoever wins that game will definitely be leaped ahead there to the driver's seat, really, probably for the playoffs so they can win out. But I think if Penn State drops that game, the Appalachian State might come back to haunt them as a bad start to the season, not a very quality win. And I know with that loss to Ohio State, it'll probably keep, especially if Ohio State keeps winning, it'll definitely keep Penn State out of the playoffs. And we'll definitely see the SEC take 2 teams over Big Ten in that case, if they even do get 2 teams. Obviously, Oklahoma is definitely contesting for that 4th spot. I agree with you there. And Alabama, unless they can lose probably 2 games, I don't see them not being in it. Just by their prestigious their name. I mean, that's about it today for the Philly special. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next episode.